welcome to the Parents Guide. This is where you'll find out what's going on in schools and hear some of the key issues being discussed from the parents' point of view. If you have school-aged children, this programme is for you. We'll be focusing on behaviour in secondary schools with two parents, Rinomhota and Janice Williams.
Hello.
We're also joined by a consultant with many years' experience in secondary education, Jan McKenley.
Hello.
We've been looking at some programmes from Teachers TV and we'll be showing some extracts during our discussion. These programmes were made for teachers, but they also open up a window for parents to look into classrooms and see what's going on in schools today. Teacher and pupil safety in schools is consistently ranked as one of the greatest concerns for schools and, of course, for parents. In this first extract, we see some dramatic reconstructions that explore how Islington Green Secondary School addresses pupil safety.
At Islington Green, they have found that identifying no-go areas for pupils within the school grounds has been a simple and effective way of helping to reduce tension.
Sometimes the girls' changing rooms can be scary because that's when teachers are not around and it's only the girls in there and no teachers come in. So there's fights or people scare each other. That's where big things usually happen.
We found that while we thought we were patrolling the school at various key points actually in the school day, that the students themselves wanted other areas looked at. So we did a very simple exercise where we got the students themselves to identify around the school site, just with stickers on a piece of paper, where were safe areas and where were areas that they'd felt less safe and secure.
Toilets.
Yeah, especially on your own.
Yeah.
Girls used to just climb over and look down sometimes, and you know, that's just how bad it was, basically.
And they'd smoke in there, and you wouldn't want to go to the toilet. You'd rather spend your day bursting to go than go.
Home.
We've then made sure that people are there on those particular corridors or around the site at key times, and that has really had a positive impact. And a number of the students have come back and said, yep, that place that I didn't like to go to before, you know, it's no problem now.
In assemblies, they tell us where to go to feel safe, so we were in a troubled situation, we'd go to student reception or somewhere where the teachers could talk to us, like the staff room, so that's what we could go to for help.
Janice, what do you think about the sort of emotions that some of the girls were showing there? I mean, quite extreme. Does that worry you?
Very much so, yes. I think these kids need to learn what to do when they feel angry or jealous or frustrated. They need to learn other ways of expressing that won't hurt other people and scare their fellow pupils. And I don't see anywhere that schools are addressing that.
Jan, do you think that's true, that schools aren't addressing anger management issues? Or
I think that's unusual. I couldn't agree with Janice there. I do think that many schools that have challenging behaviour are engaging with anger management programmes. They're involving the educational psychologists in the area, and they're trying to devise intervention programmes to engage with some of those very real issues. Lots of children feel rage and anger, often about their home backgrounds, often about injustices that they see perpetrated in the school. They feel that they don't get this kind of attention they require. They're frustrated. And, you know, there are lots of schools try very, very hard now to engage with what's really going on. What is preventing a child from accessing the curriculum?
And what about the parents' role in this process of helping children to come to terms with these issues? Do you think schools are doing a good enough job in involving parents?
I think that there are some schools that are exemplary in the way in which they involve parents, but many are not. There is still a feeling that you're kept at the school gate. And in secondary, that gets compounded by a view that they should be grown up now, and it's the school's responsibility to develop that side of them. And I think that there's not enough partnership between parents of secondary-age pupils and secondary schools.
So parents, Shupi, what would be an exemplary homeschool scheme from your point of view when it comes to behaviour? What would you like to see your daughter's school doing?
I feel really one of the main issues is really how schools communicate with parents. But I can see that there may be a problem because schools are busy environments, teachers have got many things to do. Nonetheless, I would like to see really an environment where I feel the schools are communicating with us parents adequately, and indeed we do know what's happening to our children. And
Janice, is that your experience as a parent, that you know what's going on?
Not at all, no. I think they rely on our children to bring home letters and newsletters, and if you've got a slightly disorganised child, you know, you can find them a term late. I think in the future they could make much greater use of the internet, whilst I realise not everyone's got access to that. I know some schools, private schools, will have the homework of every lesson for every day on the internet, so you can check up, so you know what your child's supposed to know. Even if your little darling says, no, Mum, there was no homework today, and you look in the planner and it's blank, if it's on the screen, you can then check up. Children have got a vested interest sometimes in doing as little work as possible, and a vested interest in not being the bridge of communication between home and school, and I think schools have to find a way around that.
Jan, do you think there are other things that schools should be doing about the environment? We've talked about the no-go areas are quite extreme, but in terms of the layout of the school and the way schools are designed, that would alleviate the problems of poor behaviour?
It would be unfair to put so much stress on the environment. It's actually about the relationships. Behaviour management is often an issue about relationships between parents, between the school and parents, and between parents and pupils and pupil-teacher relationships. And so we need to manage that triangle of relationships more systematically than we have in the past. You know, I think that parents now expect and want a different degree of engagement. The ritual parents' evening is not enough information. And the homeschool contract and the expectation that, you know, you'll be filling in the log, some of that is realistic, but in many cases it's unrealistic, and yet we still think that those are the two main routes in which we might communicate with parents. And in this age of communication, they're woefully inadequate.
Yeah. OK, well, thank you. We're now going to look at another maybe less serious but equally irritating aspect of poor behaviour, which is disruption in the classroom. And in our next clip, we visit Moulton School in Northamptonshire, where teaching consultant John Bailey is helping a teacher deal with disruption in her Year 10 class. The cause of the disruption, two chatty girls, are caught here on camera.
Catherine worked out for me that Ben earned £512 per week for 52 weeks. She times those together to find out his annual...
You're a bit fed up with them, aren't you? Fed
yes,
up may not be. Actually, what's the right word to put to it? What's that character thinking now? What's that expression saying?
I'm frustrated that even though I've been to those two girls specifically 3 times, they're not the least able in the group. They are in the middle range of that group. That's a task that I think is within their ability level, but they constantly need reassurance.
615.
So what are you going to do?
When it's 462 times 52, the answer of that, take away the tax allowance.
Yeah.
And then that's the answer.
That's it. And the next one's exactly the same.
Are they all the same?
The first two...
It looks as though at least 1 or 2 of them are going in for attention-seeking activity. You're constantly drawn over there.
Danielle, I can hear you here. I'm coming over there in about 10 seconds.
Yeah, but I'm still working.
OK?
When you're here, they say, yes, Miss, no, Miss, or I don't understand it,
They
Miss.
don't want the attention when I...
But then when you go away, it all starts again.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't just want your attention, they want to keep things going around the room.
Harris, I don't want to know if Ollie pushed him off a chair. I'd like you to try and answer that question, please. Can you do that?
Miss, will you tell acting? Ryan goes, cheers for that, and then Ollie goes like that and goes, do you want another then, and pushed him again off his chair.
Oh, did he start doing that?
There's a bit of fur around the hood and it had come off on the floor, and Stacey got it and whipped it around Ryan's head.
There is something incredibly girly about this group of girls, isn't there?
Mm-hmm.
Janice, can you tell us what happens next after that extract?
A bit later in the lesson, she has a nice little chat about them and shows them her wedding photographs so that they can all be girly together. And this is deemed to have solved the problem, as far as I can make out.
But in the interim, she withdraws attention from them, so the wedding pictures are sort of a reward for...
Yes. So she stops focusing on them so much, because obviously focusing on negative behaviour is going to encourage it.
Did you think that was successful?
I thought it could have been done a lot earlier and a lot quicker right at the beginning. I think they should have nipped it in the bud. I think I would have said to those 2 children, you need to stay on task and stop chatting. If I see you chatting again, I'm going to have to split you up.
Chupi, what do you think? Do you think they should have been allowed to stay in the lesson, those two girls, if they were disrupting other people's learning?
No, I don't. I think they should not have been allowed to stay in the lesson. For a start, I think they should not have been sitting together. I think that's one of the issues. But I think there's a wider issue than that. How much disruption should be allowed in a classroom by a few number of pupils, or 1 or 2 pupils, who indeed interfere with the education of the majority of the pupils in that school? As a parent, that's a concern to me.
Jan, this is really a much bigger problem, isn't it, than the more serious behaviour issues that often dominate the media, because it is the low-level disruption that all parents and all kids who want to work know is the most maddening thing about being in a classroom.
Yes, and I mean, obviously, John Bailey has a particular approach that was designed for that teacher. And as we see in the film, she gains confidence from the advice that he's given her. And you know, as we're talking about individual responses for pupils, so we're talking about individual responses for teachers. That strategy worked for her. Again, like Janice and Shupi have said, I can't understand why those girls are still sitting together. But when I also look more broadly at her classroom, everybody sat in rows facing the front, seems very pedestrian. Her voice is quite shrill in that film. And actually, you know, we do a lot of work around voice, engagement, setting up the task properly. You know, it seemed to be one set of exercises for all abilities in that classroom. That's not usual, you know, and so those two girls are quite able and should have been getting on with things. And the other thing I'd say is it's no good pathologising too. Actually, Keris was much more disruptive than Danielle. You know, so both of them are getting lumped with that's very easy in schools. The temptation to lump kids and to forget their individuals, they just become two chatty girls, is very tempting.
What is the norm now in teacher training then for secondary school, for managing this kind of classroom behaviour?
I think parents, and we have to be, you know, I'm a parent too, parents describe learning as something very silent and non-interactive and terribly disciplined. Actually, learning is not like that anymore. You know, learning is much more interactive. So maybe there would be more opportunities for those girls to be oral and vocal because of the range of things that they might be asked to do in a classroom. Perhaps to do some drama work around taxation and numbers. Believe it or not, people do a lot of work around maths and drama. So I felt there was a lot more going on, but, you know, I do think that in this case, the perspective of parents, I think one of the things that's quite interesting, some schools bring parents in and do lessons with them to show them what is now the kind of pedagogy, you know, the classroom organisation, the styles. And that's actually helpful because a lot of people were educated where you were expected to be silent.
Shupi, do you want your children in silent lessons or acting things out, and which of the two would you like to go and see?
What Jan says is very interesting, and I agree to some extent with that, that learning indeed can occur when there is dialogue and discussion between pupils, depending on the exercise they have been set and on the nature of the lesson. But I would question as a parent, where the environment is noisy and the individual concentration is required of pupils to focus on the work they have been given and to think about it so that they can internalize those issues. A noisy environment, I don't think, is conducive to learning in such a scenario.
OK, well, we're now going to look at another clip. And in this programme, we're going to follow Harriet Wall, Head of Learning Support at Drayton School in Banbury, as she applies the school's distinctive behaviour management system called restorative justice. This is based on getting students to think through the consequences of their bad behaviour.
Guys, it's actually pretty quite serious, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really, whether it was done as a joke, it's actually really quite an immature act to do, isn't it, to spit across the room when the teacher's not in the class. All right, now, obviously, some people here have got absolutely nothing to do with this. OK, so I would quite like people to be quite honest at this point.
I did some of it.
Thank you. You haven't done any of it?
Some of it. Yeah.
No, thank you, Luke, for being honest.
Someone was chucking at me as well.
Right, this is what we need to get to the bottom of. Anybody else want to own up? Thank you. Matthew?
I ain't got.
You haven't. Jade? No. Orion?
No.
Right, OK, so the rest of you, OK, I'd like you to go back into the class. I'm going to come and see that you have settled.
RJ is based on asking pupils a number of key questions. What happened? Who was affected? And how can things be put right?
So, do you have any idea how you've just affected that class?
We got all over it.
OK. So who's been affected now?
The classroom.
Yeah, anybody else?
Teacher, people, Mark.
OK, Mark. So what can we do now? What, you know, what's the fair or the right thing to do now to get this sorted? Because you know, you've got choices to make, haven't you? I mean, Luke, you've got serious choices to make. OK, you've just come back in, haven't you? And Matthew, you need to really start making the right choices. Because there's only so much a school will tolerate. And you actually have completely disrupted the learning of that whole class.
Shupikai, did you think that was a successful way of resolving the issue?
I am not convinced that some of the pupils at that level, at that age, are emotionally mature enough to understand the issues that are occurring, which is what the expectation is. I think it's a good idea to get them to understand what they have done, the consequences of their action. The question for me as a parent is, if a pupil says, well, I don't know, what to do next, then what happens? I think that's an issue for me.
Can I just ask Janice Gooley whether you think it was too lenient on the culprits?
They didn't actually recognise that it's disgusting to have someone spit at you. It's really unpleasant, as well as being unhygienic and unsafe. They were allowed to get away with sitting there in silence, slumped, not even making eye contact with the teacher, and I felt that it was a potentially very good technique that hadn't really been carried through properly. Those kids didn't recognise the effect they'd had on the classroom. They just sat there and waited for it to end, and I wasn't convinced that they were likely to behave any differently in the future. They also got a lot of attention for their negative behaviour.
Jan, what do you think? Do you think it would have been a successful way to restore the relationship between those two boys and their obviously rather stressed teacher?
I think that this is quite a difficult one to call. I actually think that spitting is beyond the pale. So, in the context of, as a parent, if I'd heard that somebody had spat at my child and two boys had indulged in spitting over my child, which was essentially what was happening in the clip, I think that is beyond acceptable behaviour in normal society. I don't see why schools should have a different set of rules. So I think that, what you've got to be careful of is that the technique doesn't undermine your normal policies around behaviour and discipline. I can't imagine that that's an OK thing to do in that school.
But in general, the idea of restorative justice, you think, can work?
I think these are all techniques to build a culture of respect in a school, to show that people are valued, both pupils and teachers and members of staff.
Did you find yourself wondering, as I did, watching them, what was going on in these what was going on in their home lives that made them feel it was acceptable to do that in the classroom? And to what extent, therefore, does the school have to try and work with what does go on at home to resolve the issues?
Yes, I think parents can need a lot of support to, instill good behaviour standards in their children themselves. In my experience, parents have got very few resources. They know it's wrong to hit, they know it's wrong to be very, very punitive, and they think, OK, well, what do I do? And they're often at a loss as to know what to do. But I wonder if those parents are going to find out their children have been spitting in school.
Did you feel there was anything good in it at all, then?
I think they're trying to respect the pupils, and I think that's very important. They're actually listening to the pupils, which, in my experience, some schools don't do when something goes wrong. And that can mean things go badly wrong. My son was in a fight where, for his own macho reasons, he didn't like to point out that he'd actually been attacked by another child. I was called in as though the two boys had been equal participants, and it was only later when some girls said, well, actually, your son didn't start it, he tried to stop it, but he only, he was pushed over, basically. But he'd got punished on an equal basis because the school thought, let's be fair. Fair. Well, that's not fair, actually. My son got something on his record that wasn't appropriate because the school hadn't listened.
Jan, that's an absolutely classic vignette from a parent, isn't it? My son was provoked, but then should he have responded? And is it right to deal with both parents and both children equally in that situation?
I think this. If you ask pupils, you ask parents, this is the absolute bottom line. Fairness is deemed to be treating people the same. The bully is given the same status as the victim, and it's completely. And the thing is, whether or not it's wrong, or whether we're all struggling to engage with the appropriate sanctions for these sorts of difficult cases, is not the problem. The problem is it sends a message to everybody that this is, deeply wrong. It's unfair. So that restorative justice should involve people saying, often involves other pupils defining what is right and wrong, what should happen, what's an appropriate sanction. And I think the other thing that we've got to be careful, it's not the technique. The technique is very powerful, well used, and it helps build a culture in a school. But wrongly applied, clearly, it becomes self-indulgent.
Now we're going to look at another programme which features Preston Manor School in Brent, a school that has brought down the number of students excluded from 7 per year to just 1 in the last 3 years. How did they do it? Well, partly by starting early, as we see here, with the Year 7 Anger Management Scheme, led by teacher Nikki Rowe.
First instance, you're going to do a negative reaction, okay, where you may blow up, feel angry, swear, okay, storm out, something that may have happened where you actually reacted in a negative way. And then the alternative response is going to be a positive way. What could you have done differently so that it didn't blow up?
How could you deal with this more positively?
So think about how you'd like to do it. You can use whatever props you need, their tables and their books or whatever, and think about what a teacher would react to, like if a student did that, okay? And you need to think about the ways a teacher would carry themselves. Voice may change slightly. Zach, tell me when you're ready.
Ready, miss.
Okay, you two boys are paying attention to what they're doing, yeah?
Zach, you're late. Sorry, sir, I won't get again. Zach, take off your hoodie. No, I don't want to. I'll give you a detention. So I don't care. Why are you always picking on me? Can you just leave me alone, please? And you're the only one in the class that's wearing wrong stuff for the uniform. So can you take it off now? Just leave me alone. You always... Where do you think you're going, Zach? Just leave me alone. Be quiet.
Good one, that one. Nice one. Zach, do you want to come back in for a second? Excellent. Okay. What was wrong when he walked in that classroom? Kadeem?
He had his hoodie on, he had trainers on, and he was walking in with attitude.
Basic uniform and the wrong attitude in a sense, yeah. Action!
Sorry, sir, I'm late. There was traffic down the road. Sorry, sir. Okay, Zach, can you take off your hoodie and your trainers, please? Yes, miss. For yesterday, you was being so rude, but today you've changed. I don't know why. Maybe some sense came to your head. Yes, sir. Sir, can you give me a help, please? Yes. I'm stuck on this one. I'll get my big book. This is Libya. It's a country in northern Africa.
Okay, boys, that's brilliant. I'm going to cut you there because you're so involved in your role play. A quick clap for that as well.
Shupi, did you feel using role play there was successful with younger pupils like that?
I think I have to say yes, to a great extent. What I liked most was the comment made by one of the pupils when he commented about how the other pupil entered the room, about the trainers, about working with an attitude. And it would have been interesting to know how the pupils see what an attitude is. But they do know because they talk about these things.
Janice, how important do you think it is that schools start right at the beginning with sort of embedding these strategies with children?
Well, really, they should have this dealt with in primary school, but given that they may have some children come up to secondary school who haven't learnt these very basic ways to behave, I think they need to do something about it. I would like to have seen them addressing the issue a little more deeply, such as what do you do when you feel like stomping around and putting up your hood and not wearing your uniform, but you know that actually that's counterproductive. What do you do with those feelings? Who can you talk to? What do you say to yourself to deal with that?
What I think Janice is saying is that there's dealing with real situations and thinking, what is it that makes somebody so angry they come from home like that? And that's where the problems are. You know, how much should teachers get involved with the real the issues behind the presenting problems? You know, a lot of children have to get themselves up and get to school
Without
and are angry
breakfast.
about that, sad about it. Often when children are angry, they're actually sad and disappointed. And, you know, and how much can we expect teachers to get involved in that? That's why there are now more different people adults with different kinds of skills that are working in schools.
And do you think we need more resources for that? Really digging in behind the...
Secondary schools have got lots of resources. You know, this is about imagination and creativity in the way you use those supplementary adults that you've now got that are now coming into school.
Shupi, do you feel happy about the fact that your children's school has to deal with these other issues as well as teaching your children who may not have home problems that will send them to school unhappy and disappointed in the morning?
I think schools haven't got much choice really, because if children turn up at school with anger issues or other unresolved issues, they no doubt affect their learning. So I think it is reasonable for schools to deal with them. I would disagree with Jan up to a point about schools having enough resources. I think, yes, you are right that they do have resources, but I'm not so sure that they have enough resources to deal with all the different aspects of anger management and other issues of other behavioral issues that actually may pose problems to teachers. I think they do need more support, and they do need the resources to do that.
I just want to say that many parents have no idea how well-resourced secondary schools are around the amount of staff who are now involved. Some secondary schools look very like their primary school, with help, with learning mentors and teaching assistants and people who work alongside pupils to give them additional support. Though, I think, interestingly enough, parents don't always know what a secondary school classroom actually looks like.
Yeah. And if I could come in, a lot of those people are very poorly trained and very poorly paid, and unlikely, I think, to have a level of skills to be able to make a huge impact on the children they're trying to help.
Yes, I mean, I think there is a sense in which we're expecting teachers to be amateur psychologists.
And these classroom assistants and mentors as well.
Exactly, and these are really important skills when it's as Shupi said, it is an issue of resources, the right resources for the task that they now face.
Okay. Well, I think many parents would agree with those comments, but we have to end it there. You can have your say, though, by emailing parents@Teachers TV, and you can find all the information about programmes you have seen and more on our website at Teachers TV, details at the end of the programme. Thanks to my guests, Jan, Shupi and Janice.
Goodbye.
And from myself, Fiona Millar, thanks for joining us, and until next time, goodbye.